It was a bright Monday morning in the small town of Millstone. The sun was shining softly, birds were singing, and the streets were quiet. 74-year-old Miss Gloria Thompson stepped out of her home with a small cloth bag in one hand, a wooden cane in the other. She wore a plain blue dress, glasses, and an old sweater to protect her from the morning breeze. Gloria was a kind woman. Everyone in her neighborhood knew her. She smiled at children, prayed for her neighbors, and never missed her morning walk to the grocery store. She walked slowly but with grace, taking careful steps. Her legs were weak, but her heart was strong. She was thinking about the apples she would buy today and maybe some bread for the birds she fed every evening. But just 2 blocks away from the store, something strange happened. A black and white police car suddenly stopped near her. 2 young officers stepped out quickly. They looked serious, maybe even angry. "Ma'am," one of them said sharply, "where are you going?" Gloria looked at them a little surprised. "I'm just going to the store, officers. It's right there," she said, pointing down the road. "What's in the bag?" The second officer asked, stepping closer. "Just some empty bottles. I returned them for coins," Gloria answered politely. The first officer took the bag from her hand without asking. He looked inside and made a face. Looks suspicious." Gloria's eyes showed a flash of hurt. "Excuse me, but that's mine," she said gently. "You're walking around alone, no ID, no reason to be here," the second officer said. Gloria tried to explain. "I've lived here for 40 years. Everyone knows me." But the officers didn't care. One of them pushed her bag onto the ground. Bottles rolled out onto the sidewalk. People nearby began to notice. A man across the street took out his phone and started recording. "Do you think I'm dangerous?" Gloria asked softly. "Ma'am, we asked the questions," one officer replied. Another person nearby shouted, "Hey, leave her alone. She's just an old lady." But the officers ignored them. One officer stepped too close and bumped her shoulder. Gloria almost lost balance. That's when something changed in her eyes. She slowly pulled out her old flip phone from her sweater pocket. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. Tiredness, pain, anger. The officers laughed. "Who are you gonna call?" One of them joked. "Your grandson." Gloria didn't smile. She didn't answer. She looked straight into the officer's eyes and said calmly, "No, my son." The officers looked at each other and chuckled. "Oh really? And who's your son?" The mayor. Gloria didn't reply. She opened the phone, pressed a single number, and held it to her ear. The street was now silent. She spoke into the phone quietly. "Baby, it's happening again. 2 of them, yes, just like before. They touched me. I stayed calm, but they didn't listen." She paused. "Yes, I'm fine, but they don't believe I live here. Yes, you can talk to them." She looked up and handed the phone to the officer who had pushed her bag here. She said. The officer hesitated. "Who is it?" "Talk," she said simply. The officer put the phone to his ear. His smile faded. "This is Officer Daniels speaking," he said nervously. The voice on the phone was firm and powerful. "This is U.S. Attorney General Daniel Carter, and the woman you just harassed is my mother." Daniels went pale. His lips trembled. He didn't say a word. The voice continued. "You have 5 seconds to explain your actions, and you better pray the camera behind you wasn't recording." Daniels looked around. People were watching. Phones were out. A local shopkeeper stood, filming from her store's steps. Gloria stood tall now, her cane in one hand, her other hand calmly adjusting her glasses. There was no fear on her face. The other officer whispered, "Is this for real?" Daniels was frozen, his mouth open but no words came out. Suddenly their police radio buzzed. "All units stand down on Maple Street. Orders from federal." The voice was loud. Everyone heard it. Daniels lowered the phone. He gave it back to Gloria with shaking hands. She took it and spoke one last sentence into the phone. "Thank you, son. I'll see you soon." Then she ended the call. Silence. A young boy nearby whispered to his mother, "Mom, she's someone important, isn't she?" The mother nodded slowly. "She's always been important, they just didn't see it." As Gloria bent down slowly to pick up her fallen bottles, a stranger came to help, then another, and then someone offered her a chair. Others began shouting at the officers. "Shame on you. She's your elder. You messed with the wrong woman." Daniels and his partner stood frozen, unsure of what to do, but Gloria didn't speak another word. She simply sat down, placed her cane across her lap, and looked at the rising crowd. Around her, her face was calm, but her eyes told a long story. A story of pain, of silence, of respect that had been stolen again and again. But not this time. This time the world saw it and they were watching. The street was now full of silence and eyes. Everyone watched as Miss Gloria Thompson sat quietly on the wooden chair someone had offered her. Her cane rested gently on her lap, and her cloth bag with the bottle still rolling beside it lay on the ground. The 2 police officers stood nearby, frozen, unsure what to do. The younger one, Officer Daniels, was still pale from hearing. The voice on the phone, his partner, Officer Reed, looked confused and scared. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what they had just done. People from nearby stores had come out. A few were filming. One shopkeeper whispered, "That's the U.S. Attorney General's voice." I've seen him on the news. It's really him. A woman from the crowd walked over to Gloria and gave her a bottle of water. Ma'am, are you okay? She asked softly. Gloria gave a tired smile. Yes, dear. I'm used to this. But I wish I wasn't. A little girl walked up with her father and gave Gloria one of the apples that had fallen out of her bag. Thank you, sweetheart, Gloria said, her voice warm and full of love. Then, the sound of tires screeching broke the moment. A sleek, black SUV turned the corner and came to a stop right at the scene. The windows were tinted. The door opened slowly. Out stepped a tall man in a sharp, dark blue suit. His face was serious, his steps firm. He walked straight toward Gloria. The crowd began to whisper, "That's him. That's Daniel Carter." "No way, the Attorney General." Gloria smiled gently when she saw him. "You didn't have to come, baby." "I always come, Mama," he replied, kneeling beside her and gently holding her hand. Then he stood up and turned toward the two officers. "I am Daniel Carter, U.S. Attorney General of the United States," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "You put your hands on my mother. You humiliated her. You disrespected her. And you thought no one would care." "Daniel's tried to speak, sir. We didn't know." Daniel held up his hand. "Exactly. You didn't know, and that's the problem." The crowd was now completely quiet. Everyone listened. "You saw an old black woman walking with a cane. You assumed she was no one. You didn't ask, you didn't check, you just used your power to hurt." Gloria sat watching her son, her eyes filled with quiet pride but also sadness. She had seen too many moments like this in her life, but this one was different. This time the whole world was watching. "I have your badge numbers," Daniel said calmly. "There will be an investigation. There will be consequences." Officer Reed started to cry. "We didn't mean to. It's not about meaning to," Daniel said sharply. "It's about what you did." He turned to the people around him. "Please, if you recorded anything, send it to the DOJ email. This isn't just about my mother. This is about everyone who gets mistreated and has no one to call." A loud voice shouted from the back, "You're doing the right thing, sir. Justice for Gloria." Someone else yelled. The crowd clapped. A few people cried. Gloria stood up slowly. Daniel helped her. "Let's go home, Mama," he said. She smiled. "Let's go feed the birds first. They'll be waiting." The two of them walked toward the SUV. Daniel opened the door for her like a true gentleman. She got in slowly, but with her head high. Before closing the door, Gloria looked at the crowd. "Be kind to each other," she said softly, "even when no one's watching." Then the door closed and the car drove off. The officers stood frozen, still surrounded by cameras. The clip of the moment went online within the hour, and within 4 hours, it went viral. News channels began running headlines. "Police harassed elderly. Woman turns out she's mother of U.S. Attorney General. Justice meets power. Daniel Carter confronts cops after mom's mistreatment. America listens as Gloria speaks." A new civil rights voice emerges. The town of Millstone became the center of national attention. But for Gloria Thompson, she didn't want the fame. She just wanted respect, and this time, finally, she had it. The streets of Millstone were never the same after that day. The video of Miss Gloria Thompson and her son, Daniel Carter, the U.S. Attorney General, spread across the internet like fire. People watched it again and again, how calmly she had spoken, how proud and powerful her son had been, and how silent the police officers became when they realized who she was. But in that silence was the truth. It had always been there. Back at the police station, Officer Daniels sat alone in the break room, his head in his hands. His partner, Officer Reed, stared at the wall, his face pale and still. No one spoke to them. No one dared. The chief had called them in earlier. "You've embarrassed this entire department," he had said. "And it's not just about who her son is, it's about who she is." Both officers knew their careers were in danger, but what hurt more was knowing they had judged her so quickly. Meanwhile, Gloria sat in her kitchen, stirring a cup of tea. She looked out the window at the birds in her garden. Daniel stood nearby, watching his mother with quiet eyes. "I should have come sooner," he said. "You always come when it matters," Gloria replied. They sat together in silence. Not an awkward silence, but a powerful one. The kind that holds memories. The kind that says things words cannot. Daniel took her hand. "I don't know how many others were treated like you, Mama, but I'm going to make sure this ends. Not just for you, for everyone." Gloria nodded slowly. "Do it right, son. Not just fast, but right." At City Hall, the mayor held a press conference. Reporters asked tough questions. Will the officers be punished? Is racial profiling still happening in Millstone? Has the Attorney General spoken to your office? The mayor sighed. "We're cooperating fully with federal investigators. I want to be clear, what happened to Miss Gloria Thompson was unacceptable. But it happens every day," one reporter added. The mayor couldn't argue. He just looked down. Back on the internet, the video reached millions. People commented from every corner of the world. That officer didn't even care who she was, until he got scared. Her silence was more powerful than shouting. "This reminded me of how my grandma was treated. Thank you, Miss Gloria." News anchors debated the moment. Psychologists talked about respect and fear. Civil rights leaders shared the clip during marches 1 week later. Something unexpected happened. A letter came in the mail. Handwritten from Officer Reed. Gloria opened it slowly, her hand still gentle but aged. The letter read, Miss Thompson, I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did was wrong, but I want you to know. I see you now. I don't know why I judged you so quickly. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was fear, but I'm ashamed of myself. Thank you for not raising your voice when you had every right to. Officer Reed *. Gloria folded the letter and placed it in her drawer, right next to her Bible. Then she sat quietly at the window again, birds fluttering in front of her. Across town, Daniel stood at the steps of a courthouse. He faced a crowd of reporters. We are opening a full investigation into misconduct in Millstone's police department, he announced. But this is not about revenge, it's about accountability. A reporter asked, was it hard to stay calm when it happened to your own mother? Daniel replied, it's always hard to stay calm, but she taught me how. Back in her garden, Gloria picked up a small stone that it was smooth, round, and warm from the sun. She placed it next to 4 other stones in a small line. Each stone represented something, one for pain, one for patience, one for prayer, one for justice, and the last, for peace. She looked at them and smiled, not because the world had changed completely, but because, for the first time in a long time, the world had paused, it had listened, it had gone silent, and in that silence, truth had spoken louder than ever before. The town of Millstone had never seen so many cameras. Reporters stood on sidewalks, camera crews followed city officials, and neighbors watched from porches as news vans parked near the courthouse. The name Gloria Thompson had become known far beyond the town. To the world, she was now a symbol of quiet strength. But to the people who really knew her, she was just Gloria, the kind woman who always said hello and fed the birds. But everything had changed. At the center of it all stood her son, Daniel Carter, U.S. Attorney General, dressed in a dark suit and speaking in calm, steady words. He stood in front of the courthouse podium with purpose. I didn't plan to bring this to the national stage, he said, but the truth doesn't ask for permission. It finds its own way out. He looked around at the crowd. My mother taught me many things growing up. She taught me to be kind, even when others are not. She taught me that silence can sometimes speak louder than shouting, and she taught me that dignity has no price. The crowd clapped softly. Some people nodded. Others wiped quiet tears from their eyes. Inside the police department, things were different too. 2 officers had already been suspended. The department's body cam policy was under review. A new training program had been ordered, and the federal team was reviewing past citizen complaints. Chief Simmons stood at the front of the room during a press conference and said, we failed. Not just Miss Thompson. We failed the trust our people gave us. No excuses, just honesty. For the first time in years, the room was silent after a police chief spoke. Meanwhile, Gloria sat on her porch holding a small cup of tea in her hands. Her garden was quiet, her cane rested beside her, and her eyes looked tired but full of grace. A young journalist named Maya sat across from her with a notebook. Miss Thompson, Maya asked gently, how did it feel when your son stood up for you like that in public? Gloria smiled a little. It felt like the sun had come out after a long storm. And what would you say to those officers now? Maya asked. Gloria thought for a moment, then answered, I'd say look closer next time. Not with your eyes, but with your heart. That same day, a local school invited Gloria to speak at a student assembly. Kids had seen the viral video. Some made drawings of her. One little girl held a poster that said, be brave like Miss Gloria. She stepped onto the stage slowly. Her voice was gentle, but the room fell completely quiet when she spoke. Some people think I'm special now, she said with a chuckle, but I was the same woman last week. The same lady who walks to the store and smiles at strangers. She paused. But the truth is, what happened to me wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever been judged too quickly. Every grandmother, every father, every child who didn't get a chance to speak. The students clapped loud and long. Many stood on their feet. Teachers wiped their eyes. One teacher whispered, she changed this town without raising her voice. But the change wasn't just local anymore, Daniel. Carter was invited to Washington for a national meeting on police reform. He stood before Congress and told the story not just of his mother, but of what it meant for families across the country. Said, this wasn't just personal, this was a mirror. And America had to look at itself. Members of Congress nodded. A new reform bill was proposed. Inspired by the events in Millstone, people began calling it the Gloria Act. Back at home, Gloria received hundreds of letters. From strangers, from young children, from elders in small towns who had lived through similar moments. She read each one slowly. Some made her cry, others made her laugh, but one letter stood out. It was from a woman in Alabama. Miss Gloria, I was scared to ever speak. I always thought no one would care. But then I saw your story. You reminded me that I matter too. Thank you. Gloria folded that letter and placed it next to the one from Officer Reed. Both were reminders of something powerful. One person's quiet truth can awaken the conscience of a crowd. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Gloria sat in her backyard once again. The birds were back. The wind was soft. Her son Daniel walked up beside her. "They're calling it the Gloria Act," he said with a smile. She chuckled. "I didn't ask for that, I know," he replied. "But sometimes the world sees what we try to hide." She looked up at the sky, the clouds turning pink and gold. "I just wanted to buy apples that day," she whispered, and instead, Daniel said, "You helped change the country." They sat in silence, but this silence was different. It wasn't fear, it wasn't pain, it was peace and truth, the kind that never hides forever. The town of Millstone had changed, but not just because of headlines or viral videos. It changed because the people had seen something they couldn't forget. They had watched Miss Gloria Thompson, a quiet elderly woman, treated unfairly in broad daylight, and they had seen her son Daniel Carter, the U.S. Attorney General, stand beside her with strength and calm. The truth had come out. Now it was time for justice to follow. Investigations began inside the Millstone Police Department. Fear had taken over. The two officers who mistreated Gloria were no longer at work. Officer Daniels had been placed on leave. Officer Reed, who wrote Gloria a letter of apology, had requested a transfer. But this wasn't just about two men. The entire department was under review. Federal investigators arrived in black suits, carrying clipboards and laptops. They met with the police chief, checked complaint files, and even interviewed community members. A female investigator named Agent Lopez led the team. She stood in front of the local news cameras and said, "We are here, not just for one case, but for every voice that went unheard." The news explodes. TV channels across the country reported on the Millstone case. The Gloria movement became a trending topic. Civil rights groups marched peacefully in front of the police station, holding signs like, "Respect has no age. Dignity is not a privilege." Gloria spoke for all of us. Even celebrities shared the video clip of Gloria's moment of silence. One famous actor tweeted, "This isn't just a video. It's a mirror, and we all need to look." Community speaks. People in Millstone who had been quiet for years started coming forward. One man said, "They pulled me over 6 times in 1 month, but I stayed silent. Not anymore." A woman said, "They ignored my report when my son was mistreated. But when I saw Gloria on TV, I knew I wasn't alone." A small meeting was held at a local church. Daniel Carter was invited. He sat on the front bench, listening as mothers, teachers, and elders spoke. Each story was different, but the pain was the same. Daniel stood up at the end and said, "If you feel like no one ever listened before, know this. I hear you now, and we're not going back to silence." The church echoed with applause. Letters and changes. The Gloria Act moved fast through Congress. If passed, it would require body cameras for all officers in small towns, make it easier to report police abuse, fund community-led review boards. People across the country began writing letters in support of the bill. In one news clip, a reporter said, "From a quiet town to a national stage, Gloria Thompson has become a symbol of grace, strength, and justice." Officer Reed speaks. A week later, Officer Reed appeared in a short local interview. He sat with his head down. "I thought I was doing my job," he said quietly, "but now I realize I wasn't seeing people. I was judging them." When asked what changed him, he said, "Her silence, her eyes. That moment, I saw my own mother in her." Gloria's forgiveness. Gloria had been quiet for days. She didn't want attention, but the town wanted her voice again, so she agreed to one more interview. Sitting under her favorite tree, she looked into the camera and said, "Do I forgive them? Yes, because if I don't, my heart carries the weight. But forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering and still choosing peace." That short clip touched millions. Even Officer Daniels watched it in tears. Protest turns into prayer. One evening, a protest was planned outside the police station. But when the crowd gathered, something unexpected happened. Instead of shouting, they held candles. They stood together in silence, just like Gloria did that day. And then someone began to sing softly, "We shall overcome." Others joined in. Tears filled the eyes of strangers who had never spoken before. The silence was no longer fear. It had become a prayer. A package from the president. One morning, Daniel came home carrying a large envelope. He handed it to his mother. It was from the president. Inside was a letter and a small medal of honor. The letter read, "Dear Miss Thompson, your quiet courage has reminded this country what real strength looks like. Thank you for showing us that true justice begins with dignity. Your voice has awakened the hearts of millions. Sincerely, the President of the United States." Gloria smiled softly and whispered, "But I didn't speak much." Daniel replied, "You didn't have to, Mama." The world finally listened. The days passed quietly after the storm. The cameras were gone. The reporters had left. But something in the town of Millstone had changed forever. Not just laws, not just headlines. Hearts had changed. Peace returns to Gloria's life. Miss Gloria Thompson was once again just Gloria, walking slowly to the store, feeding birds in the afternoon, and watering her small garden before the sunset. But now, people greeted her with more than just a smile. "Good morning, Miss Gloria. Need help with those bags? We saw you on TV. You gave us hope." She never asked to be a hero. She never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to be treated like a human being with dignity. Daniel's mission grows her son. Daniel Carter had become even busier. He flew between cities, speaking about police reform, working with Congress on the Gloria Act, and meeting families across the country who had similar stories. But no matter how far he traveled, he always called home. "Hi, Mama," he'd say, every evening. "Did you feed the birds today?" Gloria would smile. "Yes. And they brought their babies this time." Their bond stayed strong, stronger than headlines, stronger than politics. It was love. It was family. And it was real. A school named after her one day. The mayor visited Gloria at her home. "We have something to show you," he said. He took her to a small school on the east side of town. Children stood outside holding a banner that read, "Welcome to Gloria Thompson Elementary School." Gloria covered her mouth in surprise. The principal stepped forward and said, "You showed our children what quiet strength looks like. We want them to grow up remembering your story." Gloria looked at the children so full of life, full of dreams. She nodded slowly. "Promise me one thing," she said softly. "Teach them to be kind. Teach them to see with their hearts." The children clapped. One girl ran up and gave her a hug. Final interview months later, Gloria was invited to speak at a national women's event. She wore a soft gray dress and a pearl necklace. Daniel stood nearby, smiling proudly. On stage, the host asked her, "What would you say to your younger self if you could go back?" Gloria looked out at the crowd. "I'd say, keep walking. Even when your legs feel weak, even when no one sees you, keep walking, because someday the world will look up." The audience stood and clapped for a long time. She didn't cry, she just smiled. The ending is peace that evening. Gloria sat on her porch again. The sky was orange and soft, the kind of sky that made everything feel calm. The birds flew low, landing in her garden. She watched them for a while, then placed a new stone beside the others. One for pain, one for patience, one for prayer, one for justice, one for peace, and the last one for hope. Daniel joined her, sitting silently. "Do you think they'll remember?" she asked. He looked at the stones, then at the stars. "They'll never forget, Mama, because you didn't shout, you didn't fight, you just stood. And sometimes, standing is enough to change everything."